But you agree that the fact that he didn't put a glove on didn't turn out to create any significant evidentiary issues in this case, because everybody knew who was holding the gun and everybody knew who shot the gun. You agree with that?
I do.
And sir, you also agree with me, don't you, that a police officer's first responsibility is to save human lives, not collect evidence?
Correct, as I stated, yes.
And do you recall that Ms. Gutierrez was actually checked by EMTs when she was sitting in the back of Lieutenant Benavidez's patrol unit?
Yes, I did see that.
And you agree that she was allowed to make phone calls?
Yes, she was.
I think you indicated that you talked a little bit about that Detective Hancock sort of took possession of Ms. Gutierrez. Do you recall the statement that you made in that regard?
I do.
So I want to ask you, and one of the examples you gave was that Detective Hancock even accompanied Ms. Gutierrez to the restroom, right?
Yes, she did.
But in watching the body-worn camera footage, isn't it true that Sergeant Christopher Zook tells Detective Hancock, she doesn't want to go to the bathroom alone, will you take her to the bathroom? Ms. Gutierrez actually asks to be accompanied to the bathroom. Do you recall that?
I do.
And do you agree with me that it was Ms. Gutierrez who asked to be placed in Detective Hancock's patrol unit? That wasn't something that the police just unilaterally did with her.
No, she did. She did ask.
Is there a problem with them granting her request that she be accompanied to the bathroom?
No, but I didn't think that included going into the bathroom with her. Can I elaborate?
Sure.
I believe she stated something along the lines of she didn't want to talk to anyone from production. So it's kind of like if she was with Detective Hancock, she wouldn't be approached by any of her coworkers. I think that was her intention of being escorted. But I didn't think it included going into the bathroom itself.
Well, she went into the bathroom and she had her back turned to Ms. Gutierrez. What's the big deal? Ms. Gutierrez asked for an escort. How did that hurt the investigation?
Hurt the investigation?
Yeah.
It did not.
Now, Ms. Gutierrez stayed on set and she was sitting in a police car with the door open, and there was a coworker of hers sitting in there visiting with her. You agree with that?
Yes, I do.
And she had her phone. You agree with that?
Yes.
She was allowed to make phone calls.
Yes.
She was never placed in handcuffs. You agree with that?
Correct.
So what's problematic about that? How was she mistreated by police?
I didn't say she was mistreated. It was every appearance of not being free to leave. I based that on the fact that when Lieutenant Benavidez would step away from his vehicle, he would tell a deputy to keep an eye on her. If she's free to leave and she's just sitting in the back of the unit with an open door, she should be allowed to walk away if she wanted to. It gives the impression that she is in custody when you're not free from constant observation from law enforcement.
Well, but isn't it true that she seemed to be having a panic attack, and it was appropriate for Lieutenant Benavidez, when he walked away, to ask another officer to keep an eye on her, to make sure she's okay? Isn't that true?
At that time, she appeared fine.
Did she? Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
So Was it your expectation that Mr. Baldwin should have been detained? Do you believe that they should have detained him?
I do.
And do you believe that they should have put him in a police car and taken his phone away?
Not necessarily placed in a police car, but he should have been segregated from the other witnesses, and his phone should have been taken to preserve evidence.
Don't you agree with me that there has to be probable cause that there may be evidence on the phone before the phone can be taken?
But they wouldn't know if there was going to be evidence on the phone without interviewing him. There was no other way to know whether there was evidence on that phone or not. But he was on the phone when law enforcement arrived, so who was he talking to?
Well, did you look at his call logs?
That's after the fact. I'm talking about when deputies arrived at the scene.
Okay, I appreciate that, but what I'm trying to figure out is what about your concerns actually turned out to be real issues with the investigation? What evidence was missing or hidden by Mr. Baldwin? What evidence do you have?
We don't have the full contents of his phone.
Has the defense filed any kind of a motion in this case to try to get the full contents of his phone?
That I don't know.
And you understand, though, that a full extraction of Mr. Baldwin's phone was done in New York, but we were given a limited report. You understand that?
Yes, I do.
And you also understand that originally the same thing happened with Ms. Gutierrez. A limited report was generated from a full extraction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you agree with me that defense counsel is free to issue subpoenas and file motions to compel and do all of those things in a case if they feel that they're missing evidence?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So do you think that it would have been appropriate then for law enforcement to take Ms. Gutierrez's phone away from her and not let her make a phone call to her mother?
That can be monitored also. I've seen it done both ways. I've seen them taken away where they're not allowed to make any phone calls, and I've also seen where they've been able to make a call in the presence of law enforcement.
Sir, generally in your experience as a law enforcement officer, do you usually continue to investigate an individual for a crime after you have, let's say for months, after you have been unable to develop a single lead that that person was involved? Do you need me to rephrase that question?
I think I understand your question. You're saying, do you continue an investigation of someone that you have no information to
Yeah,
believe
right.
they committed a crime?
You looked, you executed a search warrant, you interviewed the person numerous times, and you just simply don't have any evidence that they were involved. At some point, don't they just not become a suspect anymore?
I don't know if that's the correct phrase, but
What
your
would the correct-
your investigation is over. You've taken the investigation as far as you can go.
Right.
Right.
So at some point with Mr. Kinney, they executed a search warrant, they interviewed him numerous times, and they didn't come up with anything. So what do you think they should have done to continue?
At that point, there wasn't much further they could go.
And, sir, are you aware that the FBI will not do DNA testing on rounds, whether they're spent or unspent? Were you aware of that?
I heard about it in this case, but they have done DNA testing on casings, unspent casings.
Well, weren't you present? Were you present for a pretrial interview of the DNA expert in this case?
I was.
And you heard her during the interview state that they won't do this kind of DNA testing, correct?
I did.
All right. And And you agree with me, sir, that police officers, when they arrived on scene, they knew immediately who the shooter was?
I think that information arrived shortly after the first deputies arrived, but it was before the lieutenant arrived. There's a little lag there, but not much time at all.
Okay, and Mr. Baldwin didn't leave the scene, did he?
He did not.
You testified on direct examination that there was a person who left the scene that was never identified. Do you recall making that statement?
I did, and that was based on what came out of some of the interviews. I don't quite recall. I think the lieutenant asked if we had everybody. And
What lieutenant are you talking
Lieutenant
about?
Benavides.
Okay.
And one of the deputies responded with, one left. And I think he asked who that was, and the deputy didn't know.
But you know, don't you? Because you interviewed him and you asked him. Didn't you interview Reed Russell? And when you interviewed Reed Russell, he told you that he left so that he could go to the hospital to be with his close friends. And before he left, he gave all of his contact information to the police. You interviewed him. Do you recall that?
I did.
Do you need to see a copy of the interview?
I don't.
And you also understand that Mr. Russell, who left the scene to go to the hospital, was interviewed the very next day by Detective Cano. Aren't you aware of that?
I am, yes.
So what's the mystery? Who's the mystery man that left the set? He was identified, right? Correct?
Mr. Russell was identified, but I was never quite clear if it was the same individual.
Even though you asked him and he said, I'm the guy that left the set to go to the hospital?
Yes, but did he know he was the only one who left?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Elliot. I'll pass the witness.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Elliot,